an important point here is to know that this is like a historical crime scene. We will never know for 100% sure what happened, but we can, get a fair estimate of what would have happened. So one thing to know is around 46% of the world's population is united by a single language family. Again, from Sinhalese to Marathi to Bengali to Persian to all Scandinavian languages, all Germanic languages, your Latin, your Spanish language, all are kind of united by a single language family. You would have noticed something that for many of you, it would have been easier to learn French or German than to learn Tamil. That is something that you would have also known or experienced. So these are two examples of two words which are common across all the languages. Now we'll kind of concentrate on the right first. The word in the center, do, is very similar to what is to or do. Now if you see all the languages which are kind of given on the edges, you can see how those words are very similar. Like say a do in Hindi is very similar to a do in Persian, which is very similar to a do in Italian, which is very similar to dos in Spanish, which would be very similar to say to or tui in Dutch or Danish, which is again similar to Greek in dio or to any other language. So you can see that a single word, but you will not find this similarity in other language families like say Tamil or Telugu or any of the Chinese language family or any of the Semitic language families, say where like your Hebrew or Arabic belongs to. The word at the left, which is again the origin of the word 100, one can see how 100 is very similar to say the Latin centum, cent, or the French cent, what we say, or again which is very similar to so, shambar. It kind of shows the evolution of the word, origin of word like Kimtom into various language families around the world. But these are just two examples of many other words which are kind of related. And this is not just about the words. So now you can see three gods. Which is the god on the left?
Is it Thor?
Yeah. God in the center?
Is it Indradev?
Yeah, Indra, yes. And the god on the right?
Zeus.
Yeah. So even the concept of the king of gods is a very common example across major of these cultures which speak these kind of languages. Like the sky god who kind of wields a powerful weapon, and he's the king of the gods and who lives in the sky. And not just the gods, the left, the chariot. Like the importance of chariots in Indian mythology and in ancient Indian warfare is very similar to how chariots were important in the Greek Odyssey, the Iliad and Odyssey, like the Greek epics, and is very important also in the Persian mythology, and is also important in the Roman and the Scandinavian mythology. This, however, the importance of chariot is not so there in other cultures. The second thing in the middle, so it actually stands for Aditi Devo Bhava. Like you welcome someone into your home, like he becomes a guest of honor. This kind of honor in say a guest and a host is not just kind of alone to the Indian subcontinent. It also exists across many other places which kind of speak these languages. You would have heard about Pashtun soldiers safeguarding American soldiers who were welcome into their homes. Similar stories have exist across ancient Greek texts in the Homeric text of Troy. Now the third part. Ever wonder why do you have two name system? Like why do you have a name and a surname? Actually, again, the name and the surname system is very common to the Indo-European language speakers. If you kind of gone in the south, you find that the name and the surname system kind of changes a bit, where the name of the father kind of has an important status. While in the north and also in most of the countries in the Eurasian subcontinent, you will find that people have a name and a surname. The surname always kind of identifies either the village you come from or the profession of your ancestors or what your ancestors did. In fact, it is said that the two-name system mostly spread with the spread of the Indo-European group of languages. Now, it is not just in culture and language that you have similarity, but even in your genetics. Now, there are many types of DNAs. Now, you have to understand that there are two major families of DNA. One is called the Y-DNA, which is kind of you get spread from father to son. And second, there is a mitochondrial DNA, which is called the mtDNA, which is inherited from mother to daughter. Now, if you see the spread of the Y-DNA, which is kind of inherited from father to son, you will find a graph which is very similar to the speakers of the Indo-European group of languages. Now, if you can see my cursor, the way the Indo-European group of languages there, from India to Russia and to Europe, is again the spread of the DNA is also very similar the way language has spread, which kind of shows that there is a similarity between the speakers of the Indo-European languages and even the DNA and the genetic makeup. Now, just to give you an idea, this kind of tree gives you how the Indo-European group of languages spread across the world. So you have two major families, which is say the Indo-Iranian on the left and the European on the right. And the European speakers kind of is a combination of your Spanish family, Germanic, English, Russian. Now the left one, which is Indo-Iranian, is a combination of your Persian group of languages. Again, your Northwestern, which is Punjabi, Nepali, Bengali, Marathi, Urdu, Hindi. So you can see how all these languages are related to one another. So this is one singular reason why, a person kind of speaking any of this language family, like any one of this language family, can easily pick up any other language family. Now the idea is to know that why are these languages so similar, and if they're so similar, where did these languages originate from? Now I will tell you some 2 or 3 stories before we kind of dive into the origin of it. Mitanni was a very ancient Iranian civilization which kind of ruled the upper Euphrates or Tigris in what is today northern Iraq and Syria. Now they kind of ruled between 1475 to 1200 before Christ, which is around 3,400 years from now. Now the name of the capital was Vasukhani. Now you will immediately realize that it's a kind of a very Sanskrit-like word, which means mine of wealth. Hittites were kind of their neighbors, and in their capital, we kind of found the oldest surviving horse training manual in the world. Now we will see what does this manual consist of. Now the kind of the horse training manual consisted around four tablets and around 1,000 lines by a Mitanni horse trainer named Kikuli. That was the name of the horse trainer. Now these are some of the experts from the horse training manual. For example, they uses many Indo-Iranian words or Sanskrit words, like say Asusani, which is kind of a form of Sanskrit. Aswasani which means horse trainer, or Aikavartana, which means 1 turn, or say Teravartana, which means 3 turns. And henceforth, one can see that there was a Sanskrit-like language spoken in northern Iraq as far back as 1400 BC. Now, Mycenaean is a kind of a term applied to an art of culture of Greece, which is around 1600 BC, which is from now around 3,700 years ago. Now, the Mycenaean culture, the name Mycenae, is kind of derived from the site of Mycenae in what was earlier ancient Sparta, where there stood a great Mycenaean fortified palace. Now, Mycenaean Greek is kind of the most ancient form of the Greek language, and it is also written. Now, what happened is when they kind of translated that language, which is they preserved it in writing, they found it's very similar to the Sanskrit language. Right? It had all the rules of grammar of which Sanskrit had. So it preserved all the archaic Proto-Indo-European features which are not present in the ancient Greek. Like languages evolve over time. However, this ancient language was very similar to the language which went on to be the modern Sanskrit. So this is some of the ancient pictures. Now, here lies the problem. There was like a Sanskrit family which was spoken in northern Iraq around 1400 BC. Also, there was a very similar language which was spoken in ancient Greece. But in ancient times, languages kind of reached a certain place only with the migration of a big band of people. So, if 2 language families had to exist in 2 different places of the world, one had to be sure that there was a migration of people from some point on the globe to these 2 places. Now there are 3 migration possibilities. Did all these languages say originate in Europe first? Can this be the truth? The problem with this is, if the languages had to exist in say northern Iraq and India by around say 1400 BC and 1000 BC, one has to be sure that one had to start from Europe by around 1000 years earlier. So one has to know that these languages would have existed in Europe around 2500 3000 BC. However, we are sure from the culture and the languages and whatever we have found in Europe that the languages of Europe from 2500 BC were not Indo-European. They were a completely different language family. In fact, the only descendant of that language family is a region in Spain called Basque. The Basque language family is the last remaining descendant of the original European languages. So one can say that these languages did not originate in Europe. And the second question is, did this language originate in India? And did they spread with Sanskrit? The problem with that is, if Greece, the old Greece, had to exist in around, say, 1600 BC, then again they had to start from India 1000 years in the past. That means they had to start from India around 2600 years ago. The problem with that is, we had a civilization in India at that time. We call it the Indus Valley civilization, the Harappan civilization. The problem is, Harappan civilization do not seem to speak the Indo-European language family. The language of the Harappan civilization does not seem to be Sanskrit or any of its relative, because up till now we have not been able to decipher the seals of whatever the language of this culture. Tomorrow, if someone finds out that the Harappans spoke a Sanskrit kind of language, it would completely change archaeology as we know it. But till that point in time, from whatever evidence we have now, we can safely say that the language of the Harappans was not Sanskrit. So one can say that if Harappans did not speak the Sanskrit kind of language, then this Indo-European family did not originate in India. So where did they originate? Now, the most leading hypothesis as of now is they originate somewhere in between. So somewhere between Europe and India. Now, the closest estimate we have is what we call the Kurgan hypothesis, which says that these language and the people originate in somewhere in southern Russia. So Kurgan is kind of a burial.